Welcome to the deep dive. We take the sources you send us, dig into them, and pull out the key insights so you can get well informed fast.
That's the idea. Quick understanding from listener sources.
Exactly. And today, we're diving into something pretty interesting, maybe even a bit against the grain. It's about the power of silence.
Specifically silence when you're dealing with, you know, disrespect, betrayal, someone just stepping way over your boundaries.
Yeah, and the thinking here comes directly from Napoleon Hill. So just so we're all on the same page, whenever we're referencing his ideas, we'll explicitly say Napoleon Hill says.
Got it. Crucial context.
Because let's be honest, when someone wrongs you, the instinct, that gut feeling, is usually to react, right? To defend yourself, explain your side.
Oh, absolutely. You want to set the record straight, make them understand.
But what if? What if that's not the strongest play? What if silence is actually more powerful?
That's the core question we're exploring. We're using excerpts from a piece called Don't React. Cut them off silently, Napoleon Hill motivation.
Right. So our mission today, really, is to get inside Napoleon Hill's perspective on why staying silent can be this potent tool for keeping your own power and, honestly, your peace of mind.
Yeah, it's fascinating because Napoleon Hill immediately challenges that knee-jerk reaction most of us have.
He does. He points out, doesn't he, that when we feel slighted or betrayed, the first thing we want to do is jump in, explain, argue, correct them.
But Napoleon Hill suggests that very act, that reaction, is kind of like handing over your power in the situation.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. Napoleon Hill says when you react like that to the disrespect, the boundary push, you're basically playing on their turf.
Exactly. You're stepping into the ring they might have set up, and the louder you yell, the more upset you get.
The more they know they've hit a nerve, Napoleon Hill says, is like proof to them that they got to you.
Precisely. Your reaction is the feedback they might have been looking for. It shows they still have a hook in your emotions.
But then he flips it. He talks about silence as something totally different.
Yeah, Napoleon Hill presents silence as this unpredictable force, something the other person can't easily control or even interpret. It's expect a fight, right? Or at least an explanation.
And they get nothing, just silence.
Which can be deeply unsettling for someone trying to provoke.
And importantly, Napoleon Hill stresses this isn't about being weak or just ducking the conflict. He actually frames it as the opposite.
Right, he calls it self-mastery. Instead of getting swept away by the emotion, you're making a conscious choice.
A deliberate choice not to engage on their terms. That takes discipline, doesn't it? That pause.
It really does. And Napoleon Hill digs a bit deeper into why we feel that overwhelming need to react in the first place.
Where does he say it comes from?
Often, Napoleon Hill suggests it's the ego, feeling bruised, feeling hurt, or just that really basic human need to be understood, to be validated.
Yeah, that makes sense. But he pushes back on that, too.
He does. Napoleon Hill says, essentially, that not everyone deserves your explanation. Not everyone is entitled to a piece of your emotional energy.
That can be a hard pill to swallow, especially when you feel genuinely wronged. You want to be heard.
For sure. But Napoleon Hill argues that saying nothing, that intentional silence, actually sends its own message, a really powerful one.
And what is that message, according to him?
Napoleon Hill puts it quite starkly. He says the message is, you no longer have access to my mind, my peace, or my presence. It's a boundary.
Wow. Not drawn with words, but with the lack of them.
Exactly. And Napoleon Hill posits that the person trying to provoke you, they'll often feel the weight of that absence, that silent withdrawal, much more intensely than they'd feel your angry words.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical, I think. Napoleon Hill says not everything even needs a response.
Right. He talks about insults, little slights, minor disappointments, things that maybe just aren't worth your energy.
It's like he's asking, why give those things your valuable headspace, your emotional fuel?
Precisely. And Napoleon Hill suggests some people actually feed off that energy. They enjoy the drama, the emotional tug of war.
They want you upset.
Yes. And the more you fight to be heard or to prove you're right or get vindication,
The more you drain your own peace. Which, Napoleon Hill warns, is often exactly what the provoker wanted in the first place, to disrupt your calm.
So the advice from Napoleon Hill is pretty clear. Refuse the bait. Don't get drawn in.
Master your emotions so that silence becomes, like, a shield. Is that the idea?
That's a great way to put it, a shield.
Yeah.
It's about not letting their negativity get inside your own sense of calm.
And Napoleon Hill acknowledges this isn't easy, right? It takes work.
Oh, definitely. He says it takes real discipline to stay calm when everything feels chaotic. And it shows growth when you can choose stillness over joining the noise.
Napoleon Hill paints this picture of someone walking away silently, Not as defeated, but as rising above.
Yeah, rising above the pettiness, above needing someone else to validate how you feel, above those toxic emotional loops we can get stuck in.
And here's a key point, I think. Napoleon Hill asserts that every time you consciously choose not to react,
You're actually building your own power, like exercising a muscle. The more you practice that restraint, the stronger that silence muscle gets.
that's a really empowering way to think about it. It's not passive, it's an active strengthening.
hmm And Napoleon Hill then kind of zooms out, looking at the bigger picture.
What does he say about how the world responds?
He suggests that, in the long run, the world tends to reward strategic, quiet movement more than just loud reactions. It's about effective action, not just noise.
Impact over volume.
Exactly. And he ties this back to inner strength and self-discipline again, being centered, being unprovocable. That takes work.
And the payoff. Napoleon Hill says if they can't provoke you.
They can't control you.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
There's also that element of unpredictability he brings up.
Right. If your reactions aren't automatic, if people don't know what button to push to get a rise out of you.
You become harder to manipulate, harder to predict. And Napoleon Hill says that unpredictability is a form of power. They don't know the rules of the game with you anymore.
Which leads nicely into another point Napoleon Hill makes: just how much energy we waste sometimes.
How so?
Well, think about trying to explain yourself over and over to someone whose mind is already made up, or getting sucked into pointless arguments that just go in circles.
Yeah. Totally draining. Napoleon Hill basically says stop doing that.
Pretty much. He's quite blunt. You don't owe everyone your voice, your explanation, your pain.
There's a kind of freedom in that, isn't there? Just walking away quietly. Let them wonder.
Napoleon Hill thinks so. Let them sit with your silence. It forces them to confront the situation without you providing the dialogue.
And the impact of that silence, Napoleon Hill says it often cuts deeper than angry words.
Yeah, because you can argue with words.
Yeah.
Right. You can twist them, dismiss them, but silence.
It's just there, unarguable, a void.
Exactly. And Napoleon Hill uses this powerful metaphor. Silence is like holding up a mirror.
A mirror, how does that work?
Well, for people who thrive on conflict, who need your reaction to feel validated or powerful,
Yeah.
your silence gives them nothing to push against.
So they're just left.
Facing themselves, their own actions, their own motives, in the quiet absence of your reaction. That can be really confronting.
And Napoleon Hill keeps emphasizing this isn't passive avoidance, it's a choice.
A very intentional decision. You're choosing to rise above, to prioritize your own peace.
Okay, let's talk about energy. Napoleon Hill uses this analogy of energy as like currency.
Yeah, a really precious resource, something you have a limited amount of, and you need to be really intentional about how you spend it.
So reacting to negativity, the disrespect, the lies, the manipulation Napoleon Hill mentions.
He sees that as a bad investment.
Yeah.
You're spending your valuable energy currency on something that drains you, that takes away from your own healing, your own growth, your own goals.
It's like pouring energy into a black hole.
Pretty much. Napoleon Hill advises being super selective. Filter where your energy goes. He even says to treat those emotional drains, people, or situations that just constantly deplete you, almost like liabilities on a balance sheet.
Wow, that's a stark comparison. Treat them like liabilities.
It really highlights how seriously he thinks we should take protecting our inner resources.
And you know, if you're finding this perspective from Napoleon Hill useful, maybe getting some insights on managing your own energy, this might be a good moment to mention if you like these deep dives, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, it definitely helps us keep bringing these discussions to you. Just a quick click if you're enjoying it.
Okay, so back to Napoleon Hill. He tackles a really common misconception head on.
Which one is that?
The idea that walking away, being silent, means you've lost, that it's defeat.
Ah, yes. Very common thought. But Napoleon Hill argues it's the absolute opposite.
He calls it wisdom, right? Dan?
Exactly. Wisdom. A conscious choice to save your energy for what actually matters to you. Your purpose, your vision, your peace.
Because getting tangled up in someone else's drama, they're chaos.
Napoleon Hill says it just steals your own clarity. Your focus gets blurred.
So how do we break these cycles if someone keeps provoking and you keep reacting?
Napoleon Hill says those who provoke often feed on that reaction. Whether it's your anger, your confusion, even your desperate need for closure, that's their fuel.
So to rise above it, Napoleon Hill recommends
Silence, detachment, and clean breaks. Don't get dragged into endless explanations or justifications. Create distance.
both physically and emotionally, it sounds like.
Definitely. And Napoleon Hill makes this crucial point. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you engage with.
So if you always react with drama,
You might unintentionally be keeping them hooked, signaling that's how you interact, but silence. Napoleon Hill says that creates distance. It creates consequences for their actions, not yours.
let's talk about closure. That's something people often really crave after a difficult situation.
Understandably so. But Napoleon Hill offers a slightly different take on it.
He sees it as a potential trap.
Yeah, he kind of warns against thinking of closure as something the other person has to give you, waiting for their apology, their explanation, their final word.
He suggests that can keep you stuck, tethered to the past, tethered to them.
Exactly. Instead of waiting for that big, dramatic final scene, Napoleon Hill says real closure comes from within.
How? Through what?
Through embracing the silence, creating space, setting those firm boundaries, and finding your own inner peace. He basically says, don't wait for them to give it to you.
Because many people are unwilling or maybe even just incapable of giving that kind of closure.
Right. So you find it yourself.
Which really brings us back to the core message from Napoleon Hill, doesn't it? The power in just walking
It
away.
basically gives you permission. You don't need to over-apologize or write a novel explaining why you're disengaging. Protect your peace. No justification needed.
Napoleon Hill has this really potent idea near the end. He says sometimes the biggest lesson for everyone involved
Is in staying gone. Just accepting that some people won't change and your energy is better spent building your own life.
Yeah. Healing comes from that acceptance, not from endlessly trying to fix something or someone that's broken.
And he closes with that powerful image, walking away quietly, letting your absence, your silence, speak the truth.
The truth of your choice for peace, for growth. It says more than words could.
Definitely.
So, wrapping this up, this deep dive into Napoleon Hill really makes a strong case for silence over reaction, doesn't it? When you're faced with disrespect or betrayal.
It really does. And it's framed not as weakness, but as self-mastery, a strategic move to keep your energy and break negative cycles.
It's a fundamental shift, really, from
Yeah.
that instinct to jump in and fight towards something more internal, more strategic.
Yeah, it encourages you to pause and think. Is reacting actually serving me here? Or am I just playing their game?
It gives you a lot to think about, how this perspective from Napoleon Hill might apply in your own life in those tough moments.
For sure. Definitely offers a different toolkit for handling conflict and protecting your own well-being.
Which leaves us with that final thought, that question to ponder from all this.
What if the most powerful thing you could say is nothing at all?